I want you to imagine, just for a moment, a truly unbelievable offer.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, picture yourself completely, utterly broke. You're down to your last few dollars, desperate, with your entire life packed into a battered suitcase and maybe a few flimsy cardboard boxes.
The ultimate nightmare.
Right. You're crashing on a friend's couch, you're staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., and you have absolutely nowhere to go. You have no idea how you're going to survive the week, let alone the month.
They're just spiraling.
Exactly. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, you're offered a lifeline. Someone wants to pay you $4,000 a month.
Wow.
$12,000 in cash. Totally under the table for just 3 months of your time. And the job. You simply have to live in one of Manhattan's most exclusive, historic, and impossibly glamorous apartment buildings.
That sounds, well, it sounds made up.
It really does. You get to wake up every single morning to a bird's-eye view of Central Park, lounging in a sprawling multi-million-dollar penthouse that looks like it belongs on the cover of Architectural Digest. Sounds like a literal dream come true, right?
But there's a catch.
There is a massive catch. The building management requires you to follow a few bizarre, entirely non-negotiable rules. If you break them, even once, you're out on the street. No second chances.
Right.
So the question I want you to ask yourself is this. Looking at your empty bank account, feeling that crushing physical weight of your desperation, would you take the deal?
It's the ultimate dilemma, isn't it? You're looking at this incredible clash between our primal biological instinct for survival and that deeply ingrained intuition, that little voice in the back of your head that tells you when something is just too good to be true.
Yeah, that gut feeling.
Exactly. And that is exactly the mission of our deep dive today. We're immersing ourselves in the chilling source material of the thriller novel Lock Every Door by Riley Sager.
Such a good book.
It really is. But our goal here isn't just to recount a spooky, atmospheric ghost story. We are going to explore the highly dangerous intersection of extreme vulnerability and extreme wealth. Together, we're going to unpack the psychology of a perfect trap. We'll examine the architectural menace of a Gothic setting planted right in the heart of modern Manhattan. And we'll analyze how past trauma fundamentally dictates our present survival instincts. We're going to look at how severe desperation acts as a blinder.
It really does blind you.
It totally prevents us from seeing the terrifying reality of our surroundings until it is far, far too late.
So I invite you to settle in, grab a coffee, get comfortable, because we are about to step through the ornate gilded doors and explore the dark, opulent hallways of the Bartholomew.
I'm ready.
Okay, let's unpack this. We really have to start by looking at our protagonist, 25-year-old Jules Larsen. Because if you were designing a trap, she is the quintessential textbook perfect victim for a setup exactly like this.
But the perfect target.
Absolutely. When we first meet Jules in the text, she is riding a spectacularly bad streak. I mean, life hasn't just knocked her down, it has steamrolled her. Just 2 weeks prior to this unbelievable job offer, she was fired from her job as an administrative assistant at a major financial firm.
And not even for cause, right?
No, not at all. It wasn't for performance. She was let go during a corporate restructuring, just a victim of a spreadsheet. So that same exact day, she comes home early, carrying her sad little cardboard box of office supplies, only to find her boyfriend, Andrew, actively cheating on her, right there on their secondhand sofa.
Oof. That is brutal.
It gets worse. She kicks him out in the moment, naturally, but his name is the one on the lease, so she ultimately has to be the one to leave. In the span of a single afternoon, this young woman loses her income, her long-term relationship, and her home.
We really need to pause and emphasize the sheer suffocating weight of her financial desperation here, because the source material is incredibly painfully specific about her reality.
It is so stressful to read.
It really is. Jules doesn't have a safety net. Both of her parents are dead. She has absolutely no extended family to rely on. She's burdened by a mountain of student loans that, mathematically, won't be paid off until she's in her 40s. Her credit cards are entirely maxed out and frozen. When she is offered this unbelievable apartment sitting job, she has exactly $432 to her name.
$432 in New York City, that is nothing.
It's terrifying. The text shows us her intense anxiety over buying generic groceries. We see her standing in the aisle, painfully calculating the cost of a box of store-brand pasta versus the luxury of buying a single orange.
Oh, that detail broke my heart.
And then there's this gut-wrenching moment of internal panic when a $110 cell phone bill automatically deducts from her account. It just vanishes, dropping her balance to $322. She is living with this loud, constant hum of worry buzzing through every waking thought. It's the cognitive load of poverty.
I'm so glad you brought up the cognitive load because it is a terrifying place to be mentally. She's sleeping on her best friend Chloe's couch over in Jersey City, and she feels like a massive parasitic burden.
Yeah, that guilt is heavy.
When your basic survival is threatened like that, your entire perspective just completely shifts. You stop thinking about next year or even next month, and you start thinking exclusively about how to survive the next 48 hours.
What's fascinating here is how financial desperation literally acts as a psychological blinder. There are extensive sociological studies on this, the scarcity mindset.
Right, I've heard of that.
When you're experiencing extreme scarcity, whether it's money or food, your brain tunnels its focus entirely on resolving that immediate lack. It radically alters your risk assessment.
So you just ignore the danger.
Exactly. If you're drowning in the middle of the ocean, you don't inspect a life preserver to see if the stitching is defective or if it might be a trap. You just grab it with both hands. Jules is fundamentally incapable of affording the luxury of skepticism.
She just can't afford it.
And the source text contrasts her mindset perfectly with her best friend, Chloe. Chloe works in human resources. She has a stable job, she's living in her own apartment, and she's dating a guy named Paul who is clerking at a big law firm and prepping for the bar exam.
So Chloe is doing fine.
Right. Chloe has stability. And because she has that baseline stability, her alarm bells immediately start ringing the second Jules tells her about this job. Chloe spots the red flags instantly.
Oh, she sees them from a mile away. Chloe is exactly the friend you want in this situation. She points out that no sane person pays a stranger $12,000 just to live in a luxury apartment.
No one does that.
Never. She calls out the shady nature of an all-cash, under-the-table arrangement with no tax forms. She practically begs Jules to let her lawyer boyfriend, Paul, just take a quick look at the contract.
Which is very reasonable advice.
But Jules looks at this entirely bizarre situation, and she doesn't see a threat. She sees a reset button, a magical way out. She literally says to Chloe in the text, "All I care about is $12,000. She needs the money so desperately that she willfully silences her own intuition.
And the people running the Bartholomew, specifically the immaculate Chanel-wearing building manager, Leslie Evelyn, they know exactly what they're doing. This is predatory.
Oh, highly predatory.
During the initial interview, Leslie asks Jules very pointed, highly calculated questions that go way beyond a standard background check. She asks about her employment status. She asks about her relationship status, specifically noting that the building prefers unattached people.
Huge red flag right there.
Massive. She asks about next of kin, and Jules admits she's an orphan with zero family. Leslie even asks if Jules has any underlying illnesses or heart conditions, and if she considers herself an inquisitive or nosy person.
So creepy.
Think about what's actually happening here. The building isn't screening for a reliable tenant. They are actively screening for a target.
A victim.
Yes, someone who is entirely alone, financially desperate, physically healthy, and unlikely to ask too many questions. They are looking for someone who won't be missed.
Totally chilling when you lay it out like that. And once Jules passes this twisted screening process and gets the job, Leslie lays out the bizarre rules of the Bartholomew. And these rules are wild. Let's really look at them.
Let's hear them.
First rule, no visitors. Ever. No friends popping over for coffee, no family, no Tinder dates, not even a delivery driver past the lobby. Second rule, Jules must spend every single night in the apartment. There is absolutely no sleeping away, not even for one night.
Just completely locked down.
Third rule, she cannot bother the rich residents. She is to speak only if spoken to, keeping her eyes down in the elevator. And finally, the fourth rule, absolutely no social media posts about the building, its interior, or its residents.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we can see exactly what these rules are designed to do. On the surface, of course, Leslie justifies them by citing the extreme wealth and intense privacy needs of the building's elite residents.
Right, celebrities and billionaires.
Celebrities, billionaires, people who use dummy LLCs to buy their real estate. They demand total discretion. That's the logical cover story. But if you look at the psychological mechanics of these rules, they are classic textbook isolation tactics.
Like what you'd see in a cult.
Exactly. You usually see this kind of systematic isolation in cults or highly abusive relationships. The no visitors rule physically cuts Jules off from Chloe, who is her only remaining support system and reality check.
And the sleeping away rule.
The no sleeping away rule ensures she is constantly on the premises, fully immersed in the environment, effectively trapped in her gilded cage.
Wow.
The no social media rule cuts off her digital footprint, making sure no one online knows her exact location or what the inside of the building actually looks like, and that no bothering residence rule socially isolates her within the building itself, making her feel small and invisible.
It's basically a non-disclosure agreement weaponized into a prison sentence.
That is a perfect way to put it. Jules is being systematically and deliberately cut off from the outside world under the highly plausible guise of an exclusive employment contract.
So smart, but so evil.
The absolute brilliance of the trap is that they are paying her to lock herself inside it. She is volunteering for her own solitary confinement because the cage is lined with velvet.
And the cage itself is just as fascinating as the psychology behind it. Let's talk about the Bartholomew, or as the locals nickname it, St. Bart's.
Let's talk about it.
The building is practically a living, breathing character in its own right. It's located on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, right there in Central Park West. But unlike the massive, sprawling, block-long behemoths in that neighborhood, the Bartholomew is described as a narrow wisp of a building.
Very ominous.
13 stories of dark, imposing Gothic architecture that looks more like a brooding cathedral than an apartment block. And it is famous for its gargoyles. They are everywhere. Stone bat wings, devil horns, menacing faces perched on the ledges as if they alone are keeping the building upright.
It sets such a tone.
Jules even gets a room on the 12th floor, apartment 12A, right on the corner, where a massive gargoyle sits directly outside her bedroom window. She names him George.
Right, she talks to him.
She actually treats him like a roommate, talking to him. It's almost charming at first, a quirky coping mechanism. But there is an undeniable, heavy architectural menace to the place. And then you have the main elevator, which is this original piece from 1919.
Oh, the elevator is terrifying.
It looks exactly like a tall, ornate birdcage. Thin brass bars, a gilded exterior, a heavy crisscross grate that you have to physically slide shut with a clang. It's incredibly claustrophobic. It forces the residents into uncomfortably close proximity as it slowly, loudly grinds up the center of the dark stairwell.
That birdcage elevator is such a perfect visceral metaphor for Jules' entire situation. She is stepping into a literal gilded cage, and she's the one sliding the heavy grate shut behind her.
Literally locking herself in.
The source text leans heavily into these Gothic tropes, taking them out of the remote moors of England and placing them right in the middle of modern, bustling Manhattan. In fact, the book explicitly features a dedication to Ira Levin, the legendary author of Rosemary's Baby.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
This source material is playing directly with that very specific trope of urban paranoia. It's the terrifying idea that true horror doesn't just happen in isolated, creepy cabins in the woods. It happens in densely packed, historic apartment buildings where you are surrounded by hundreds of people, separated only by a few inches of drywall, yet you are entirely, completely alone.
That is deeply unsettling.
If you scream, your neighbors will hear you, and they might just turn up their televisions. That's a very specific kind of modern terror.
Oh, absolutely. The proximity of other people is supposed to mean safety, but here it just means you're surrounded by potential threats.
Oh.
And Chloe, being the good, skeptical friend, actually does some digital digging. She finds an old article online titled The Curse of the Bartholomew.
Chloe is on it?
She tells Jules all about the dark rumors surrounding the building's history. Things like the original architect and builder throwing himself off the roof to his death right after it was completed.
Not a great start for a building.
It's not at all. Whispers of strange, tragic accidents, sudden illnesses among the residents over the decades. It's an environment literally built on a foundation of tragedy to foster paranoia.
And the interior design of Jules' specific apartment, 12A, absolutely amplifies that mounting paranoia. Leslie Evelyn tells her the strict rule: she has to leave the apartment in pristine condition exactly as she found it.
Right, don't touch a thing.
The deceased former owner's heavy antique furniture is still there, but the most striking, oppressive detail is the wallpaper in the sitting room. It's a busy, dense red floral pattern, a really dark, visceral crimson.
It sounds hideous.
It is. And as Jules spends more time in the apartment dealing with all her empty, unemployed hours with no internet and no visitors, she starts staring at it. And she realizes that the dark, oval, negative spaces between the crimson flowers look exactly like eyes.
Oh, I would hate that.
And once her brain makes that connection, she can't unsee it. Pareidolia sets in, that psychological phenomenon where the mind perceives a specific, often meaningful image in a random or ambiguous visual pattern.
Seeing faces in the clouds, basically.
Exactly. The spreading red petals suddenly start to look like grotesque, mutated faces. Twisted lips, elongated jaws, staring right at her from every wall. It's an optical illusion, sure, but the psychological impact is very real. She even looks up at the ceiling, at the ornate crown molding, and there are more hidden, carved faces in the plaster looking down.
I would be ripping that wallpaper down on day 2, $12,000 or not. It sounds like a waking nightmare.
It does, and it brings us to this fascinating concept of architectural determinism. This is the idea in urban planning and psychology that the built environment directly influences human behavior and emotional states.
The building is actually messing with her head.
The oppressive red wallpaper with its hidden, staring eyes perfectly mirrors Jules' internal state. She feels watched, she feels judged, she feels constantly monitored by Leslie and the building's strict rules. The architecture itself is hostile.
That makes a lot of sense.
Think about the concept of the panopticon. It's a prison design where the inmates can be watched at any given moment, but they can never tell when they are actually being watched, so they have to assume they're being watched all the time and end up policing their own behavior.
I've heard of that, the feeling of constant surveillance.
The Bartholomew functions exactly like a luxury panopticon. It is designed to make the occupant feel small, observed, and fundamentally out of place. Even the silence in that sprawling apartment feels heavy and unnatural.
And in that heavy, oppressive silence, Jules discovers another bizarre architectural relic of the past. A dumbwaiter, hidden behind a false panel in a kitchen cupboard.
Yes, the dumbwaiter.
This is such a great detail. Jules is alone, the silence is deafening, and she hears this faint creaking noise one day. She opens the kitchen cupboard, moves a panel, and feels this rush of cold, stale draft. She watches this heavy wooden box slowly rise up the dark shaft from the apartment below.
It's so spooky.
And inside the box, resting in decades of dust, is a single torn page from a book. It has an Emily Dickinson poem printed on it, Because I Could Not Stop for Death.
Very uplifting.
Right. Which, by the way, is not exactly the poem you want arriving in a creepy mini-elevator. But on the back, written in all caps, is a note, "Hello and welcome, Ingrid." Jules uses it to write back, and she quickly realizes she is communicating with the other apartment sitter directly beneath her in Unit 11A.
The dumbwaiter is a brilliant narrative device by the author, but it's also a fascinating historical relic that tells us so much about the themes of the story.
Also,
Originally, in the grand apartment buildings of the early 20th century, the dumbwaiter was purely a tool of servitude. As Leslie explains to Jules, the entire 12th floor actually used to be the sprawling kitchen and servants' quarters for a much larger palatial unit down below.
so it's just for the staff.
Right. The dumbwaiter was used to transport hot food, coal, and dirty dishes. It was specifically engineered to hide the working-class servants from the wealthy elite. The rich didn't want to see the labor. They just wanted the results to magically appear. The servants were meant to be invisible cogs in the machine.
That is a really sharp observation.
Now, a century later, look at what's happening. The temporary apartment sitters, who are effectively the modern invisible laborers of the building, paid to keep the units looking occupied, are using this exact same relic of class division to bypass the building's watchful eyes.
Wow.
They are using the tool designed to isolate them, to actually communicate in secret, forging a hidden connection in a place explicitly designed to keep them apart. It is a powerful, tangible symbol of class division embedded directly into the plaster and brick of the building.
Speaking of class division, we really need to talk about the cast of suspects populating the Bartholomew, because they are a piece of work.
They really are.
The building is full of incredibly intimidating gatekeepers and elite residents who constantly reinforce that Jules is an outsider. We've already mentioned Leslie Evelyn, who is always impeccably dressed in a perfect, rigid Chanel suit, acting as the pristine enforcer.
Right.
Then you have Charlie, the older doorman. He has these ruddy cheeks, a fuller brush mustache, and he seems incredibly kind and grandfatherly. And then you have the actual residents, people like Marianne Duncan, who is this aging former soap opera star. She walks around the lobby in a dramatic seafoam green cape and giant sunglasses indoors, clutching her tiny dog, Rufus.
Just peak Manhattan wealth.
Exactly. Everywhere Jules looks, she is reminded that she does not have the pedigree or the bank account to be there. And this tension culminates in a truly agonizing, humiliating incident in the grand lobby.
Oh, this scene is so hard to read.
It really is. Jules has just gone out and spent a significant chunk of her rapidly dwindling funds on groceries. She bought the absolute cheapest generic items possible to stretch her last $300. Store-brand pasta, off-brand cereal, the cheapest jar of tomato sauce. She is carrying these heavy paper bags, feeling the financial strain when she collides with a girl rushing down the stairs.
And it all just goes everywhere.
The bags rip, and her cheap generic groceries scatter all over the pristine marble floor of the lobby right in front of everyone. The cheap pasta snaps. The jar of generic sauce shatters everywhere, looking like blood, and she even cuts her arm on the broken glass.
It is a moment of profound, visceral vulnerability and shame for Jules. It's the nightmare of having your private struggles suddenly broadcast in a very public, very wealthy space. Now, the girl she collided with turns out to be Ingrid, the blue-haired apartment sitter from 11A, who sent the note in the dumbwaiter. But what is truly significant here isn't just the collision, it's the aftermath. Jules, bleeding and humiliated, is ushered upstairs to get her arm patched up by one of the wealthy residents, Dr. Nick.
The handsome surgeon.
He's a handsome, affluent surgeon who inherited the massive apartment 12B from his parents. While she is sitting in his luxury apartment recovering, there's a knock at her door. It's Charlie, the grandfatherly doorman.
And he brings the groceries.
He had gathered up her ruined groceries from the lobby floor. But instead of just returning the boxes that survived the crash, he went entirely out of his way. He went to a high-end grocery store and replaced everything.
Which sounds nice at first.
But he didn't buy the cheap stuff. He bought her brand new, premium, name-brand versions of the exact items she had originally purchased, plus an expensive artisanal bar of dark chocolate. He hands it to her out of kindness, completely refusing to let her pay him back.
Now, wait a minute. On a surface level, reading that, it seems like an incredibly sweet, selfless gesture from an older man trying to help out a struggling kid.
It does seem sweet, and initially it does move Jules deeply. She is touched. But the psychological undercurrent of that gesture is much darker, and it immediately triggers a profound sense of class shame rooted in a very specific, painful childhood trauma.
Oh, the cereal memory.
Yes. When she looks in the bag and sees those expensive name-brand replacements, her mind immediately flashes back to when she was a little girl growing up in a depressed Pennsylvania coal town. She had invited a wealthier friend, Katie, over for a sleepover.
Right.
The next morning, Jules's mother, who was working incredibly hard just to keep the lights on, offered the girls generic, bagged Fruit-O's cereal for breakfast. Katie, with the casual cruelty of a wealthy child, refused to eat it. She scornfully called it fake and demanded real Fruit Loops.
Kids can be so mean.
And the young Jules, desperately wanting to fit in and influenced by her rich friend, turned on her own mother. She also demanded the real thing, cruelly calling her mother's generic cereal the poor people version.
Oh, that is so rough.
This deeply ungrateful, classist remark caused her exhausted mother to just break down in shoulder-heaving sobs right there at the kitchen table. It broke her mother's heart. And the tragic aftermath was that, from that day forward, her mother only ever bought name brands. It was a crippling financial burden that cost the struggling family thousands of dollars over the years they simply didn't have, all to avoid that feeling of shame.
Wow. That is heartbreaking. So Charlie handing her those expensive groceries isn't just a gift. It's a mirror reflecting her own poverty back at her.
Exactly. When Charlie replaces her food with the luxury brands, it is a stark, unavoidable reminder to Jules of her absolute poverty. His act of charity, while perhaps well-intentioned on the surface, violently forces her to confront the fact that her financial desperation is highly visible to everyone in the building.
Everyone knows she's broke.
They see her. They see her cheap food. They know she's broke. It reinforces her deep-seated, internalized belief that she is fundamentally lesser than, and that she absolutely does not belong in this rarefied world of extreme wealth. The charity strips away her dignity.
See, if a doorman did that to me after an embarrassing spill like that, I wouldn't just feel shame. I'd immediately think, wait, he cataloged exactly what I bought, recognized it was cheap, and took it upon himself to fix it. That doesn't feel kind to me. That feels incredibly controlling and voyeuristic. Am I reading too much into that?
You're not reading too much into it at all. That is precisely the unease the author is trying to cultivate. The boundary between helpful staff and surveillance network in luxury buildings is incredibly thin. Charlie's action demonstrates that the staff are watching the sitters very, very closely. They are monitoring their habits, their purchases, their vulnerabilities.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because that feeling of being watched and evaluated continues right in Dr. Nick's apartment. while Jules is sitting there getting her cut patched up by this handsome, wealthy doctor. She notices a very specific, highly unsettling painting hanging prominently over his kitchen sink.
Ah, the Ouroboros painting.
It's an old painting, rendered in these vibrant, slightly sickly colors, deep red scales, a seasick green belly, and this blank, blazing yellow eye that looks exactly like a lit match. It's a painting of an Ouroboros, the ancient mythical symbol of a snake eating its own tail. Jules finds it incredibly garish and uncomfortable, and she feels like the snake's blazing eyes practically daring her to look away.
The Ouroboros is such a rich, loaded symbol. If we connect this to the bigger picture of the narrative, the Ouroboros is a massive thematic clue hiding in plain sight. When Jules asks about it, Dr. Nick gives her the standard philosophical explanation. He says it represents the cyclical nature of the universe: birth, life, death, rebirth. The endless, eternal circle of life.
Right, the standard museum answer.
But in the specific claustrophobic context of the Bartholomew, this symbol takes on a much darker, highly predatory meaning. Think back to that incredibly bizarre rule Leslie mentioned. The building's bylaws dictate that apartments can never, ever remain empty for more than a single month.
Oh, that's right. They always have to be filled.
It implies an endless, insatiable, cyclical hunger. The building constantly needs to be occupied. It needs fresh life breathed into it to maintain its status. So, if the incredibly wealthy permanent residents are the head of the snake and the massive Gothic building itself is the body, then what are the desperate, broke, temporary apartment sitters?
They had a tail.
Are they just the tail? The expendable part being endlessly, mindlessly consumed just to keep the cycle going? The Ouroboros suggests to the reader that Jules and the other sitters aren't really employees at all. They are fuel. They are fresh meat for a cyclical, capitalistic machine that feeds entirely on vulnerability.
They are the sacrifice that keeps the temple running. And that horrifying idea of being chewed up is literally explicitly spoken aloud by another resident. This brings us to one of the most crushing moments in the story.
Greta Manville.
Yes. Jules realizes that her absolute favorite author in the entire world, Greta Manville, actually lives in the Bartholomew, up in apartment 10A. Greta wrote this massively successful, defining best-selling novel back in the 1980s called Heart of a Dreamer. Now, this book isn't just a casual read for Jules. It is foundational to her identity.
It's everything to her.
It's a fanciful romantic story about a young, 20-year-old orphan named Ginny, who magically finds herself living in the Bartholomew, navigating high society, mystery, and romance. When Jules was a kid trapped in that depressing, economically devastated Pennsylvania coal town, her older sister Jane used to read this book to her out loud.
A beautiful memory.
The book was their escape hatch. It gave them hope. It was a glowing beacon promising that there was a glamorous, magical, sophisticated world out there waiting for them. So you can imagine, when Jules finally bumps into Greta in the lobby, she is completely starstruck.
Naturally.
She approaches her hero, gushing about how the book literally changed her life and how she must have read it 20 or 30 times. And Greta's response: it is brutal. Greta is incredibly rude, cold, and entirely dismissive. She looks down at Jules with these ice-cold blue eyes and simply says, if that's the case, then you need to read more.
It is a totally devastating interaction. Never meet your heroes paid out in the cruelest way possible. We see a powerful, tragic meta-narrative playing out here. Later on, Jules tries to smooth things over. She visits Greta in her apartment, bringing a nice, expensive bottle of wine, bought with her dwindling funds, no less.
Just to apologize.
To apologize for bothering her. Greta allows her in, and during their tense conversation over the wine, the entire foundational illusion of Heart of a Dreamer is completely shattered. Greta confesses the dark truth behind the fairy tale.
The truth about the book.
She admits she wrote the book while she was aimless, bitter, and essentially hiding from the world, living off her incredibly wealthy parents in the Bartholomew after a messy divorce. She calls the book mere wishful thinking and bluntly states, "I was a liar, and that book is my biggest lie."
That is just gutting.
The magical fantasy that literally sustained Jules through her darkest, most painful childhood moments is revealed to be a total fabrication created by a highly privileged, cynical woman who is just bored.
It's like finding out Oz is just a guy pulling levers, but the guy actively hates you.
Exactly. It rips away her last psychological safety blanket. But the most chilling moment of that entire interaction comes at the very end of their conversation. Jules, slightly drunk on the wine and feeling vulnerable, overshares. She tells Greta about her tragic past, her missing sister, her dead parents, and admits she feels like she has had enough of the real world and just wants to hide in the Bartholomew.
And Greta's reaction.
Greta stops. She stares at Jules, really sizes up her vulnerability, and delivers this ominous warning. She says, "You strike me as a gentle soul. You need to be careful. This place isn't kind to gentle souls. It chews them up and spits them out."
It chews them up and spits them out. It perfectly, horrifyingly echoes the Ouroboros painting in Dr. Nick's apartment. And that warning leads us right into the darkest, most pivotal part of this deep dive, the echoes of trauma and the disappearing sister act.
This is where everything connects.
Jules mentioned her missing sister to Greta, and we really need to unpack that backstory because it informs everything Jules does. When Jules was 17 years old, her older sister Jane vanished without a single trace.
Just gone.
Jane finished her evening shift as a cashier at a local pharmacy, walked out into the parking lot, stepped into a black Volkswagen Beetle driven by someone she apparently seemed to know, and was never seen again. No body, no ransom, nothing. Just gone.
Unimaginable.
2 years later, unable to cope with the grief, both of Jules' parents died in a tragic accident. So Jules is left entirely alone in the world, carrying this massive, unresolved, compounding trauma.
And it is crucial to understand that trauma is the absolute driving force behind all of Jules' actions and reactions in the present day. Because of the specific, agonizing way Jane disappeared, Jules has developed severe hypervigilance.
Right, she's always on edge.
Think about the timeline of a missing person. When Jane first failed to come home that night, her family wasn't immediately worried. Why would they be? Jane was 19 years old, she was restless, and she had a habit of staying out late with friends without calling.
That's pretty normal for a 19-year-old.
So her parents and Jules ate dinner without her, watched a movie on the couch, and went to bed, assuming she'd be there in the morning. It wasn't until the next day, when the sun was up and her bed was still empty, that the icy realization hit them that she was actually gone.
It must be agonizing.
Jules is entirely haunted by the what-ifs. The thought that if they had just worried sooner, if they had panicked and acted immediately that first night, Jane might still be alive. This intense survivor's guilt has hardwired Jules' brain to overreact to the absolute slightest sign of danger or unexplained absence.
You can't let it go.
She absolutely refuses to ignore red flags when it comes to the people she cares about, even if everyone around her is telling her to calm down and that she is being paranoid.
And that trauma response brings us directly back to Ingrid Gallagher, the blue-haired apartment sitter from 11A. Ingrid quickly becomes the catalyst for the entire overarching mystery. After they literally crash into each other in the lobby and Charlie replaces the groceries, they start meeting up across the street in Central Park for lunch.
Ingrid is such a fascinating character.
She really is. She is a true nomad. She tells Jules she's bounced from Boston to New York, out to Seattle, down to Virginia, and now back to New York. She is constantly running. Running from bad choices, running from bad luck, maybe running from herself.
A lot of parallels there.
And to Jules, Ingrid feels incredibly familiar. She reminds Jules so much of her missing sister Jane. They share that same rambling, restless, slightly manic pixie energy. Jules instantly bonds with her. She projects her need to save Jane onto Ingrid.
A chance for redemption, basically.
But during one of their conversations sitting on a park bench, Ingrid confesses something deeply terrifying. Out of nowhere, she asks Jules a chilling question. Do you think it's possible for a place to be haunted even if there aren't any ghosts?
That is quite the question.
Ingrid says she is absolutely terrified of the Bartholomew. She says it physically feels like all the dark, violent history of the building, all those rumors Chloe found, have accumulated over the decades and literally float in the air like toxic dust, and they are forced to breathe it in every day.
Then architectural determinism again.
Yes. And then Ingrid drops a massive, game-changing bombshell. She looks at Jules and reveals that before Jules moved into Unit 12A, there was another apartment sitter living there, a young woman named Erica. And Erica vanished without a trace before her 3-month contract was up.
This is the moment the narrative shifts from eerie to actively dangerous. Because Ingrid's revelation completely fundamentally contradicts the polished narrative that Leslie Evelyn fed Jules during her initial interview.
Leslie totally lied.
Leslie made it sound as though the wealthy owner of 12A had recently passed away, leaving the apartment unfortunately vacant and in need of a sitter. But Ingrid insists, with absolute certainty, that Erica was living there just weeks ago. Ingrid says they sent notes to each other via the dumbwaiter just like she and Jules did, and that one day, Erica just disappeared suddenly. No goodbye, no moving truck, just gone.
Just like Jane.
This discrepancy immediately puts Jules' hypervigilant brain on high alert.
Yeah.
The building management is demonstrably lying to her face, and her new friend Ingrid is visibly, palpably terrified of her surroundings.
And that mounting fear culminates in the absolute climax of our source material. Let's set the scene. Jules is spending her first full official night alone in the massive apartment. She's trying to settle her nerves. She takes a hot bath in the luxurious clawfoot tub. She bakes a cheap frozen pizza, but eats it off the former owner's wildly expensive fine china. She drinks a few heavy glasses of wine.
She's trying to find some normalcy.
And for a fleeting second, she feels a rare, genuine moment of happiness and peace. But the trauma won't let her rest. Standing alone in the dark, sprawling kitchen, she pulls out a matchbook. She strikes a match, and then she holds her left hand directly over the open flame, purposely letting the intense heat build into burning pain. She doesn't pull her hand away until her body's reflex absolutely forces her to.
It's a shocking, visceral image, and it is a profound physical manifestation of her deep psychological pain. Jules is completely overwhelmed by her total lack of control over her own life. She lost her job, her boyfriend, her apartment, and now she is trapped in a building governed by insane rules, discovering lies about the previous tenant.
It's too much.
Striking that match and willfully enduring the burn is a maladaptive coping mechanism. It's a way for her to feel something purely physical, something tangibly real, and most importantly, something she can entirely control in an environment where she feels utterly powerless and adrift.
But that moment of self-inflicted pain is violently interrupted by something far, far worse.
The scream!
Exactly. While the match is still burning, illuminating the dark kitchen, she hears a noise echoing up the dark shaft of the dumbwaiter from the apartment directly below her, from Ingrid's apartment. And it isn't just the old wood settling or a creak or a groan of the iron pulleys. It is unmistakable. It is a muffled, sharp, terrified human scream.
Horrifying.
Jules immediately drops the burning match and sprints out of her apartment. She runs down the stairwell to the 11th floor and violently pounds on the heavy wooden door of 11A. And she waits. It takes a terrifyingly long, agonizing 20 seconds before the door finally cracks open. And Ingrid appears.
But something's wrong.
She is acting incredibly, unnervingly strange. She forces this flat, wooden, highly reluctant smile. Her eyes are wide, not with surprise, but with what looks to Jules like raw, unadulterated fear. And crucially, her right hand is shoved deep, deep into the front pocket of her jeans.
Hiding it.
Her arm is rigid as if she is desperately hiding something, or perhaps reaching for a weapon or trying to stop her hand from trembling. Jules, panicked, asks if she screamed. She says she heard it through the shaft. Ingrid immediately denies it. She completely brushes it off, blaming it on a loud movie on the TV, and coldly tells Jules that she is perfectly fine and she needs to go away.
But Jules knows she isn't fine. The tension Sager builds in that hallway scene is absolutely palpable. You can feel the static electricity in the air. Ingrid's body language is screaming danger at the top of its lungs, even as her verbal words deny it.
It's terrifying.
The forced smile, the hidden hand, the urgency to close the door. It's classic behavior of someone under extreme duress, possibly with someone else in the room just out of sight. And Jules' hypervigilance, born directly from her failure to act when her sister Jane disappeared, will not let her simply accept the lie.
She refuses to ignore it.
She knows deep in her gut that something is violently wrong. But she has no proof, no authority, and she is essentially turned away at the door by the victim herself.
And the very next day, Jules' absolute worst, most agonizing fears are realized. Ingrid doesn't show up for their scheduled lunch at the bench in Central Park. Jules waits, but she never comes. Jules texts her, calls her repeatedly, but the calls go straight to a dead voicemail.
The pattern repeating itself.
Finally, unable to take the anxiety, Jules marches back up to 11A and pounds on the door again. But this time, it isn't Ingrid who answers. It is the immaculate building manager, Leslie Evelyn, holding a clipboard. Leslie calmly informs Jules that Ingrid is gone. She says Ingrid moved out in the middle of the night.
And the story Leslie tells is so incredibly flimsy.
Leslie claims that Ingrid left swiftly, completely without notice. She tells Jules that the night doorman, Charlie, had just briefly stepped away from his post at the front desk to fix a malfunctioning security camera down in the basement. And when he returned to the lobby a few minutes later, he found the shiny brass keys to apartment 11A just sitting abandoned in the exact middle of the pristine marble floor.
Just dropped there.
According to Leslie, Ingrid supposedly just dropped them and walked out into the Manhattan night, leaving absolutely all of her clothes, her toiletries, her entire life's belongings behind in the apartment.
This raises an important, screamingly obvious question, doesn't it? Jules immediately sees the massive, glaring, illogical hole in this narrative. Why on earth would a desperate, broke girl who explicitly admitted to Jules that she desperately needed the money and had absolutely nowhere else to go in the world willingly walk away from a guaranteed $10,000 payout?
It makes no sense.
And even if she did get spooked and decide to run, why would she leave without taking a bag? Without her clothes, her phone charger, her winter coat, it simply defies all human logic and survival instinct. Jules recognizes the deadly pattern instantly.
Jane, Erica, and now Ingrid.
Her sister Jane disappeared into a black car and was never seen again. Erica, the sitter before Jules, disappeared before her contract was up. And now Ingrid has vanished into the night, leaving only her brass keys behind. Jules' past trauma makes it entirely impossible for her to just swallow the official corporate story. She knows deep in her bones that the Bartholomew has claimed another victim, the Ouroboros has eaten again.
And that horrifying realization propels us violently out of the past timeline and directly into the framing device used throughout the text, the now timeline.
Yes, the flash forwards.
Throughout the book, the source material frequently flashes forward to a terrifying, disorienting reality. Jules wakes up in a sterile, windowless hospital room. She is battered, deeply bruised, her jaw is screaming in agonizing pain, and she is strapped into a heavy, restrictive neck brace.
It's such a jarring shift.
She is being treated by a male nurse with kind brown eyes named Bernard, and an older, serious doctor with a German accent named Dr. Wagner. Jules is incredibly confused and disoriented. She asks them what happened to her, how she got there, and the dramatic twist is finally revealed. Jules didn't just stumble and fall. She didn't just end up in the hospital with a minor injury. She was hit by a speeding car.
Out of nowhere.
A witness outside the building told the paramedics that they saw her sprinting out of the heavy front doors of the Bartholomew. She wasn't jogging. She was in a dead sprint, not stopping for a single second, not looking left or right, and she ran blindly directly into oncoming high-speed traffic on Central Park West.
It is a profoundly shocking image to try and reconcile. This young girl who was so incredibly desperate for the safety, the shelter, and the massive financial security of this luxury apartment. This girl who was counting pennies to buy generic pasta ultimately throws her own fragile body directly into busy, moving traffic just to get away from it.
It's hard to fathom the level of terror.
The terror inside the building had to be so absolute, so insurmountable, that the hood of a speeding taxi looked like a safer option. And the dialogue in this final scene of our source text is absolutely crucial to understanding her fractured psychological state.
How so?
Dr. Wagner is standing at the foot of her bed, looking at her chart, trying to piece together her highly erratic, seemingly suicidal behavior. He notes the witness statement that she ran out of the building without looking at all. He looks at her and says gently, "It sounds to me like you ran away."
What do you say?
Despite her massive injuries, despite the heavy, hot, suffocating neck brace restricting her movement, Jules finds a deep well of strength to correct him. She looks the doctor dead in the eye and says, "No, I escaped."
I escaped. Oh man, it gives you chills every single time.
It really does, because there is a massive fundamental psychological difference between those two distinct concepts. Running away implies guilt. It implies a sense of cowardice or fleeing from a responsibility, a debt, or a terrible mistake you made. Children run away from home. Criminals run away from the scene of a crime.
But escaping.
But escaping implies something entirely different. You escape from a locked prison. You escape from a steel trap. You escape from a dangerous predator. By forcefully using that specific, deliberate word, Jules is confirming to the reader that the Bartholomew wasn't just a quirky historic building with a few eccentric bylaws. It wasn't just an exclusive snobby address for the ultra-wealthy.
It was a trap.
It was a literal, meticulously designed trap. It was a mechanism explicitly engineered to lure in vulnerable, isolated, desperate people, lock them inside a gilded cage, and consume them for whatever dark purpose the elite residents have devised. Her desperate, terrifying sprint into oncoming traffic wasn't an act of madness or panic. It was the ultimate, calculated act of survival.
Choosing the car over the building.
She actively chose the very real physical danger of a speeding car over whatever horrifying, unimaginable fate awaited her inside those Gothic, gargoyle-covered walls.
So what does this all mean for us? We have unpacked a truly unsettling, complex narrative today. We've looked deeply at how extreme, unchecked wealth can actively weaponize poverty, using massive piles of cash as bait to blind, desperate people to glaring, dangerous red flags.
We really have.
We've explored the psychology of how unresolved, lingering trauma makes us uniquely vulnerable to manipulation, but simultaneously makes us uniquely perceptive to patterns of danger that normal, untraumatized people might simply ignore.
It's a double-edged sword.
And we have examined the terrifying socio-political idea that the ultimate final luxury for the ultra-elite might not be penthouse suites or private jets or fine art, but the absolute unchecked power to erase people entirely, to make the invisible, struggling working class literally disappear without a single trace and face absolutely no consequences.
That is the true horror of the story.
I really want you, listening right now, to reflect on this dynamic in your own life. Think about the hard choices you have made when you felt your back was truly against the wall financially or emotionally. Have you ever willfully ignored a glaring red flag, actively silenced your own gut intuition, simply because the reward being offered was precisely what you needed in that exact moment of intense desperation?
It's a hard question to ask yourself.
How much of your own intuition, your own internal alarm system, have you swallowed down and ignored for the sake of a necessary paycheck or a temporary lifeline? It is a deeply uncomfortable, highly revealing question.
It is incredibly uncomfortable because it forces us to confront our own price tags. And I want to leave you with one final, deeply unsettling thought to mull over as we conclude this deep dive into the Bartholomew.
Let's hear it.
Throughout our entire analysis today, we have seen how this building violently prides itself on absolute impenetrable privacy and total discretion for its billionaire residents. Leslie Evelyn enforces the rules with an iron manicured fist. Charlie the doorman watches the lobby like a hawk. Cameras everywhere.
There are high-tech security cameras poised over every single door and exit. The entire ecosystem of the building is pathologically obsessed with security, with rigidly monitoring exactly who comes in and exactly who goes out.
Yeah.
Everything is meticulously designed to watch and protect the elite. But in a place so heavily fortified, so heavily and constantly surveilled, isn't it absolutely terrifying that the only people who seem to completely vanish without a single microscopic trace are the young, vulnerable, broke apartment sitters hired simply to occupy empty space?
Wow.
In a building with staring eyes woven into the wallpaper and literal cameras hidden in the halls, how does a human being just disappear into thin air? It forces you to wonder. In the grand, gilded, inescapable cage of the Bartholomew, who is really watching who?